Sisters and brothers, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her." The Gospel of the Lord. A prayer that I reflect on quite a bit since I heard it a few years ago, and it's a kind of constant refrain in my mind. Not that I do well with the prayer, but I still have it in my mind, and I think you'll see why we kind of struggle with it. It's from St. Augustine. It really caught me. Augustine said, "Help me know myself, Lord. Help me know you." I found it interesting how he put the order there. Help me know myself, Lord. Help me know you. And as I reflected on it, I realized there's a tremendous insight here. In fact, it's quite profound. I've come in my reflections, my readings, my studies, and so forth, to recognize that much of what we know and believe and perceive of the world is wrong. But it feels true. It feels true. So that when someone challenges us, we feel on edge. We feel defensive. And there are various ways that we come to this false knowledge, this false reality. One way, to use an analogy just in our own biology, now I'm going to be very careful here because Father Peter is in the back and he's a biologist and he will correct me. I did not know he was going to be here. I should have done my homework. But one day I was driving in Olean and I was listening to NPR, and there was a scientist on the radio talking about, and I wish I had paid attention in biology class 40 years ago. I did not know this. We have what's called cones in our eyes. And Father Peter is shaking his head correctly. That's correct. And these cones allow us to see three particular wavelengths of color. Now, of course, they're mixed and matched, but the main ones are red, green, and blue. And the scientist said that our ancestors in the evolutionary process became very well adapted. The cones in our eyes developed to see many different types of green. So if you look outside today, and I'm seeing back behind you, the windows outside, that the foliage out there is primarily green. But you notice all the different types of green, yes? Well, according to the scientists, this developed because our ancient ancestors needed to recognize our predators, to see the distinction there. If all we saw was the same color, we couldn't distinguish them. Right? So, right off the bat, we don't see all of reality. I'm looking at you, but there's a million things I probably don't see, like invisible waves going through the air. There's Wi-Fi waves. There's radio waves. There's television waves. There's all kinds of colors that I can't see. And in fact, the scientist said some animals have more cones than us and see various different colors that we don't see. So I would love to be able to see what they see. And so because I didn't know that, I thought what I was seeing is just actual reality. It's not. There's more to reality than what I see. For me, that's an analogy of another way that we learn. And the primary way we learn as human beings is through culture. We're taught things. We're taught things that are passed down by tradition. I learned my ABCs. I learned my multiplication. And that's about as far as I got with math. I am learning disabled in math, so I know that 2 + 2 = 4, but let's not move on. I need a calculator for everything else. And so when I am enculturated, especially in my local area, I grew up in Kansas, I have a Midwest worldview that was shaped by a certain particular way of being as an American in the 20th century, 21st century, certain religious culture that I grew up in. And so what I was enculturated in became kind of normative for me. This is just reality, until someone comes along and says, no, it's not. So, for example, I was raised believing that Catholics are all going to hell. Now I just believe 60% of them are. I'm joking. So we have these enculturated beliefs. So I want to look at our text today through the lens of culture. Now, a particular Bible scholar that I read every time I have a Sunday Mass encouraged us to look at this text about Martha and Mary in conjunction with a previous story, the Good Samaritan, which we all probably could tell the story of. And he said that there's a connection there that Luke has. It's in the same chapter, so there's obviously some kind of connection there. So, briefly, a young man comes to Jesus and wants to know, how do I obtain the kingdom of God? Fair question. We humans would like to, at least I know I do, I'd like to live on. I'd like my consciousness to continue. That's probably a concern for the majority of humans. You get attached to yourself, to life. And so Jesus says, keep the law. And he names aspects of the law, and he says to Jesus, I've done that. If you want to be perfect, sell everything, give it to the poor, come and follow me. And he walks away dejected because he was attached to his material goods. And so Jesus will inform us that we need to love our neighbor. And someone asks him, who's our neighbor? And of course, we have the famous story of the Samaritan. Now, put yourself in the position of a first century Palestinian Jewish mindset in their culture. They had been taught for generations upon generations since the Babylonian exile that the Samaritans were the enemy. Now, this young man had a great deal of knowledge, obviously, of the law. And let's take him at his word. He was living the law. Even St. Paul tells us he was pretty good at keeping the law. But somehow it did not break through to his consciousness that all human beings are worthy of our respect. That somehow we have developed this mindset of making enemies, and that it's justified in some way. And Jesus comes along and he pokes holes in our cultural perceptions. Now, for us, we've heard this story so many times that the Samaritan is kind of a hero for us. That's because we're listening through a different cultural mindset. But for a first century Palestinian Jew, that's not the case. In fact, this is shocking. So shocking that when Jesus says, well, who was his true neighbor? And they couldn't even say it was the Samaritan. They said, the one who helped him. Jesus is constantly trying to break through a consciousness that creates division, that creates separation. And it's difficult. There's almost like a default setting in us to divide. We have this reaction when someone is different from us or hurts us or disagrees with us to make them an other and to set them outside the bounds of our care. And so when we look at the Mary and Martha story, we need to look at it through the eyes of culture again to get the import of it, the power of it. As you've heard me preach before, in that world, and we also heard it in the first reading, a touch of it, hospitality was incredibly important. In a world in which there were no 7-Elevens, there were no quick shops, Dollar Trees or dollar stores or Tops, you needed to rely upon the goodness and generosity of strangers when you travel. And notice in Luke's gospel, Jesus is constantly moving around, so there is a requirement, a need for hospitality, and Martha offers it to him. Normal first century Palestinian behavior. This is in fact normal in the Roman Empire. In fact, the Romans would claim it's their knowledge of hospitality and the rituals around it that made them better than the barbarians. And so, put yourself in Martha's place. Martha is a woman in first century Palestine. Women are second-class, third-class citizens. There were rules and regulations about gender and how one acts in society. A woman had to be attended by a male whenever she went out in some cases. Not all cases, but some cases. But it was recognized that women were less than men. And there was very strong patriarchal attitude in that culture. So that for Mary to sit down at the feet of Jesus, and that's a Judaism that basically means she was wanting to become a disciple of Jesus, sitting at the feet of someone, a student. She was breaking cultural norms. Martha, knowing the norm of hospitality, feed these guys, and she needed help, it was normal for her to be upset. And so she goes and tries to encourage Jesus to tell Mary to get back in her place. And so Jesus says, "Oh, Martha, Martha." And according to the scholars, when he says that twice, it's not a condemnation. It's "oh, you poor thing." Now, if you said that in the South, that might be a condemnation, "you poor thing." But it's basically, "Oh, you sweet thing, I really want you to chill, enjoy." Mary is doing the right thing here. What is she doing? She's listening to the teachings of the one who came to teach us about the kingdom of God, the rule of God. And what is the rule of God? That every human being belongs. There is no, as St. Paul says, male or female, Jew or Greek, free or slave. In God, we are all equal. We are all at an egalitarian reality. That is the ideal. It's seen in Genesis. Jesus is constantly trying to break through our consciousness so that we can see that we usually, in our brokenness, create walls. And we see this in our world today. In fact, it seems to be in our face every day. Listen to the rhetoric of the pundits, politicians, whoever it is. You have to be very, very careful about talking about politics because you don't know where people stand and they will judge you and create a wall if you disagree with them. Rather than learning how to dialogue, asking, what's beneath your concern here? Why are you following that perspective? Instead, we say, you're full of you know what. You're out of my group. And we see it in the church. We see it in the church, a church that I love, by the way. I haven't left because I love it, although I want to slap it once in a while. In terms of still this separation, this elevation of men still in the church. Notice, Jesus allows a woman to sit at his feet. Now, I could keep going. I think you get my point. God did not make these hierarchies. Humans made these hierarchies. And it's based on this false belief that this is divine order. And it isn't. It's human constructs. God breaks through and wants us to break through so that we see the other. And when we see a need, we take care of it, like the Samaritan, who didn't look at the ideology of the man on the ground, he simply saw a need. Who Jesus wanted Martha to say, yes, hospitality is important. Yeah, I could use a bite. But you put that above what I'm trying to get through to you. We religious, this is a perfect example. We live, like I said, in culture. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I came across a book. Well, I came across about 30 books, but here's one that I actually was reading. And it really caught my attention. Now, I'd thought about this a little bit, but this one really grabbed me. So I want you to recognize that we are cultural shaped and formed people. And how that will cause us, like Martha, like the young man, like the Jews who hated the Samaritans, to create walls. And we think that this is true. In a book that I came across called Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. Short little chapters, but they were very impactful. One of the metaphors we live by, and I think you're going to agree with me, is time is money. Heard that one? Time is money. And they listed certain ways of how we think in those terms. So let me give you their list. You're wasting my time. This gadget will save you hours. I don't have the time to give you. How do you spend your time these days? The flat tire cost me an hour. I've invested a lot of time in her. I don't have enough time to spare for that. You're running out of time. You need to budget your time. Put aside some time for ping pong. Is it worth your while? Do you have much time left? He's living on borrowed time. Thank you for your time. I don't know about you, but because of that metaphor in my life, which I have just swam in it because it was the normative reality of my life, is don't waste time. And so I wake up in the morning and I think, I would love to just do nothing. But I have this OCD in me that says, I gotta produce today. I've got to demonstrate that I have filled out this list of things I'm supposed to do, I should do. Nobody else is telling me these things. But it's been reinforced in me and I've accepted it, and time is of value. We have become consumers of time. Now, what we'll usually do when someone just lounges around once in a while is what we call them lazy. They're lazy. Why don't they go out and make money? We religious, by the way, we Franciscans do it all the time. We judge each other by, are you working hard enough? Because we live through that paradigm. Jesus wants to break through that cultural paradigm for us to see that even though they may not always live up to our standards of time, they are still worthy of our care. So instead of saying, oh, go get a job, maybe we could say, can we help you? Can we assist you in that? Instead of denigrating them. On and on and on. So my challenge to all of us, and believe me, this is a challenge to myself, is to allow ourselves to be like Mary and sit with the Lord. Waste time with the Lord. And listen to Him. You know what? The Lord may enjoy wasting time with you because He doesn't live in our paradigm. Contemplate that for a while.